Hello and welcome. You, of course, are listening to the Property Podcast. I'm Rob B. With me, of course, is Rob D. And this week, we're going to be looking at 7 questions you should ask yourself before buying your next property investment.
Yes, welcome. Should be a really good episode today. It will have to be a slightly short episode today, otherwise the Property Investor Show won't happen because I've got a plane to catch. So we're going to be keeping this one brief, but there's loads of really good stuff to pack in. And Rob, at your end of the line, do I detect a slightly different variety of bird song? I think you might have headed back already.
I have. I landed yesterday, luckily to a bit of sunshine, so it wasn't too bad because I left with rain and came back to sunshine. So I tried to confuse my 4-year-old son when we arrived back to say, oh, it's sunny, we're still on holiday, we've gone the wrong place. But to be fair to him, he knew I was being a silly daddy, and he batted that away. So, yes, nice to come back to some nice weather. But, of course, the reason we are back, Rob, is for the Property Investor Show, which we would have done and recorded live podcast by the time this airs, so this is going to be a bit confusing. But we are preparing ourselves to go.
Yeah, we're in one of our time warp situations again. So we're recording this the day before, but it's going out after. So, I guess we'll say not much about it, and we can talk about it with more authority once it's actually happened. But it should be great. We've got so many people coming down to help out from the RMP team, the Yellow team, the Property Hub team, and all our meetup leaders. It's going to be great. Well worth jumping on a plane for.
It is. And if you're listening to this thinking you're going to come down this weekend, don't. As we said, this is a time warp, so it's already happened. This weekend, it's probably the cake baking show, which probably wouldn't be a bad thing to turn up to. Might even go myself now I'm thinking about it. But please remember, it's happened, and we'll talk about it next week when you listen to the live show. And the week after, we'll comment on it a bit further. So now that we've got that really non-confusing part over, Rob, what else have we been up to?
Well, a couple of other interesting things have been going on. We had our quarterly review with the Yellow Lettings team last week, which was great. It's something that we try to do in person when we can, but this time we had to do it over a hangout because we were all in various different places, but a really, really useful exercise where we look back at what we've achieved over the last quarter. We look forward to the goals that we've got for the next quarter, what we're going to do, why we're doing it, and get feedback and ideas from the whole team about how we could do things better. So it just shows, I suppose, that we do at least practice what we preach. We talk about goals a lot, but we do actually use it as well. We spend a lot of time using it in our businesses, and it's really powerful to look back at a really busy 3 months and go, oh, actually, we said we were going to do all this stuff. And a lot of it we did. We've come a really long way.
Yeah, we'd be pretty big frauds if we didn't actually set goals ourselves, considering how much we bang on about it. The reviews, I talk about annual reviews personally. In business, maybe things move a little bit faster, so every quarter is more appropriate. But doing reviews whenever are really, really good. Taking stock of what you've achieved, not giving you a hard time on what you haven't done, but just looking at how much progress you've made over a certain time frame. It's really rewarding, and then gives you that motivation, that push for the next time you set your goals and your next set of time frames that you push towards. So make sure you do it. We've talked about it a lot. Don't worry, it's not another goals episode, but we do it. As Rob said, we practice what we preach. Another thing, Rob, I tweeted about this last week, and we were discussing it before we turned the mics on. So it's worth bringing up now. But we're both starting to see stronger deals and more activity from agents, being a little bit friendlier on the phone, wanting to speak with us. And there's a reason why for that. And the reason why is the stamp duty changes. The stamp duty changes have meant that people have switched off to the market. I don't know why, but they just have. The media's told them to, probably. And what's going to happen is these people in 9 or 12 months will go, oh yeah, maybe I should now carry on investing. But what it's left is an opportunity. And I'm seeing stronger deals than I have done for a long, long time. The deals are really good at the moment. And a lot more of them as well. I'm able to be a bit more picky. I'm not necessarily bringing more deals through than I was before, but I'm able to be a little bit more picky and a bit more selective, and maybe not work as hard and sweat as much to bring them through. I'm probably going to regret saying that now, and I'll be back to normal in 2 weeks. However, I do feel that there just seems to be a little bit of shift, and we were saying before we turned the mics on that it's probably just a window for a while until people realise that nothing really has changed that much and property investment goes on.
Yeah, exactly. I'm glad you've seen it as well, because I've started getting phone calls from agents who don't normally call me, inquiring about whether I might be buying. That's the kind of thing that hasn't been happening for quite a while. And I was speaking to a solicitor the other day who was saying exactly the same thing, and they've just seen everyone go nuts in the run up to April. In some cases, paying way more than 3% to save 3% as a result for bidding against other people, and in some cases using expensive finance products to get in ahead of the changes, and then just kind of going to sleep. And I'm really glad this is happening, both because it means that there's good opportunities for you and me and everyone listening, and also because I've been saying it would happen. And so the fact that we get to be right about something is great as well. I've been saying for a while that I think the second half of this year is where it's at. I think that's when you're going to have the little bit of a lull after April. Then you're going to have summer when everything's generally quieter anyway. And then if things don't come back after summer, as they normally do, that you think you could start to see some people getting nervous and even more opportunities. So there's been plenty of doom and gloom as covered over the last 9 months or so on this podcast. But I think there's always a silver lining in doom and gloom. And I think we're starting to see that starting to shine through now.
I think it's weird though, Rob, where we tend to be the most bullish in when the media is doom and gloom. And when everything's pushing on, we're always practicing caution and saying be cautious everyone and take your time and it's for the long term. So we very much go against what the media says, and for good reason, because they're reporting on what's happening now. But what you want to do is look at what's happening now, look what the consequence of what's happening now will have in a few months' time, in a few years' time. Being led by the media is not an effective investment strategy, but unfortunately for most people that's what they do. Now, the good news is you listen to the podcast. So you listen to the podcast, you clearly want to educate yourself. You may think, well, maybe the media isn't the best place and the Daily Express headlines are the best source of information for my investment strategy. So well done. Keep going, keep pushing. And if you see other property investors in your network that are falling to sleep, well, you could wake them up, but actually maybe don't, because you can take advantage of the deals they're missing.
Yeah, as a funny little detail, I don't think I've said this on the show before, but we've got a list of episode ideas that we throw things into every so often. And there's one that I added on the 1st of June last year entitled, Should You Sit Out the Buy-to-Let Boom? And my note was the Daily Mail has started running a series about how to get into buy-to-let. So does that mean it's the time to get out? And the funny thing is, before we got around to recording that episode, it became completely irrelevant because everyone changed their tune. And that just goes to show how quickly things move on.
It does. And moving on with this podcast, not so quickly, is the news story. And this is a really, really interesting news story you've dug up, Rob. Do you want to give us some more information?
Yeah, this is meant to be a quick episode, wasn't it? But we've already been rambling quite a lot. And this is a news story that merits a closer look and a bit of analysis as well. It's a funny one. The headline is, New build homes aren't the answer to rising house prices. The ideas aren't fully spelled out. It's by an academic, but it's basically a teaser of a piece of research that they're going to be presenting next month, I think it is. So there will be more detail on this. And if and when there is, we will follow up on it. But the gist of it is that they've done a study and they found that new build property induces lenders to relax their criteria. And the effect that has, that they've calculated, is that every 1% increase in the supply of new builds makes mortgage income ratios worse by 9%. So increasing supply, obviously, you think that would bring prices down. That's what we've been saying that the government should do or encourage for a very long time, more supply. But the argument is that actually makes affordability worse because it encourages looser lending practices through a mechanism that isn't actually described. I've done some digging and tried to find out, but can't. So instead, the availability of credit means that prices go up. It's one of those really counterintuitive things. There's going to be a lot more behind it that we don't know, but there are some interesting implications from it.
There are, and I think this links to very much that you're bringing new people into the market that wouldn't have been in the market before by building these new homes because they're not going to the existing marketplace, so therefore dampening the demand side of the market. Because what you're doing is building new homes, but the majority of the new homes that are being sold at the moment are under the Help to Buy schemes. So these are people that weren't in the market before. So you're bringing people into the market that weren't there before. Still making sense? Probably not. So you're probably best reading this article. But it's really interesting when you start to dig deep. Now, does that mean that you should build more homes but take away the incentives? Possibly, but then people will say, well, how do we get on the market? Well, if you build more homes, it's a longer term play, but then prices could be dampened. But we'd have to build so many that we'd never catch up. This is the whole part of the housing crisis. I'm not saying that the housing crisis is fair. It's far from fair. It's a messed up system, but it's a system that can't be fixed. I certainly can't see, without drastic changes that I don't think any government would be willing or confident enough to bring in and still expect to win votes. So therefore, I think we'll always have this housing crisis and always this upward pressure on house prices. This is probably, Rob, I think we should stop here because let's get the article out in full and maybe we can have a conversation around this because I think there's some really interesting conversation points that could come off the back of it.
I think you're right. I think there's a lot more that we could say about this, but let's put that on hold. Let's move on with the rest of the episode and come back to that in possibly a few weeks' time. Because there is lots going on here, and it is something that should interest all of us, both as investors and as people who maybe not be citizens of the UK and may not necessarily live in the UK, but certainly have ties to it and have an interest in it. It's a really fascinating topic. So yeah, more on that to come. Watch this space.
If you'd like to get that article and all the show notes related to this episode, go to thepropertyhub.net/ask yourself. And Rob, that's what this week is all about. 7 questions you should ask yourself before getting your next buy-to-let investment.
Yeah, and I think all of these are going to apply equally well, whether you're buying your first property or your 10th property or your 100th. What we try to do is identify some questions that by answering will put you in a stronger position. Whatever it is you're doing, whatever your strategy is, whatever you're buying, however experienced you are, you'll always benefit from asking yourself these 7 questions. So let's dive into the first one, shall we?
Okay, so the first one is, what are you trying to achieve? And what's your criteria? So goals, yeah, mentioned it again. But why are you doing this? If you're just investing because you think it's a good thing to do, which actually may sound daft, but that's what most people do, is they just start investing because they know generally it's a good concept. It should be something that's seen as positive and will benefit them in the long term. But that's as far as they get. You want clear plans of what you want to achieve from this. And once you have those, this property meet that criteria. So it may be that your strategy is to have a certain amount of equity or a BMV purchase of a certain percentage, or you're after a particular ROI. You want a certain return for your money, or the amount of monthly income that comes in from that property. So it may be that you want to net £400 per month. Wherever it may be, does the property that you're looking at match that strategy, match that criteria? And that's the great thing about working on your goals and your strategy. Because if you do, then you can start to push away all these distraction deals that come along. And let's face it, you'll see plenty of them if you start hunting for deals. You're going to see deals that look shiny, but shouldn't take your attention if you spend the time to make sure it meets your criteria. And you're not getting sucked in because it's a good deal, because it might be a good deal, but it might not be a good deal for you. So work on your goals. We'll put some show notes together on links to setting goals. And also Rob's latest book, check that out as well, because there's lots of different strategies in there that you can apply. Find one that works for you, implement it, and only take on properties that fit it.
Thank you for the plug there. New entry at number 2, buy within a company or not, is the next question. That's one that wouldn't have been in there a year ago. People always used to ask, should I buy a buy-to-let property within a company? And always into that, well, here are the reasons why, but for most people, probably not. That's all changed very much within the last year. Now it's far more of a factor as a result of the whole mortgage interest relief fiasco. This is not a topic that can be covered quickly. Fortunately, we've put together a free course on this exact topic that runs through the ins and outs of why a buying within a property may be a good idea in certain circumstances and not such a good idea in others. It very much depends on personal circumstances, but there are some kind of more general kind of pointers that you can turn to. The link to that course will be in the show notes along with everything else. But yeah, buying within a company or not, it's a question that everyone's going to have to think about now for each purchase. It's possibly going to be the case that you'll want to buy certain properties within a company and others not, depending on your objectives. But it can make a massive difference to what you walk away with at the end. So definitely something you should consider.
It is. It's interesting. You mentioned earlier on an episode, Rob, how fast things can move in property. And as you say, that question 12 months ago just wouldn't have made this episode, but now it's number 2 in our list. Number 3 in our list is, well, is the property a good deal? The market value is not a mystery. You should be able to establish it pretty quickly. And you should then be able to establish if you're overpaying or not. But better still, not just overpaying, not paying market value, but pushing to get a good deal and potentially getting below market value. Pay some attention to the asking price, but not a lot. Establish your own value. Whenever I'm assessing deals, people will say, right, this is the value. And I'll go, thank you. And they'll say, and the discount is this level, and I'll thank them again. And then I'll go away and come to my own conclusion. They may be right, but often they're out. Now, it may be just by a few thousand, in my opinion, that they're out. Sometimes it's drastic, and they're trying to basically con you into believing you're getting a deal. That's the issue that we have in property. The way to solve that issue, though, is research. So make sure you're checking out what price you're paying. Make sure you come to the conclusion that it's a good price, and make sure that the people who are supplying you with the information haven't got incentives to make it look like a better deal than it is. Take their research on board, but research their research. I always say that the research that I produce for anyone is the beginning of their journey, not the end. So this isn't the proof. This is a stepping stone for you to go away and do your research. If an estate agent or any other type of sales agent or wherever they're promoting says, here's all the details, this proves to you the price, thank them for it, because hopefully they've saved you some time by finding comparables, but then research it yourself and establish, do you come to the same conclusion?
Yep, hugely important. I think the key point is that you can find out. A lot of people, I think, feel like they maybe don't have the tools, or they feel like the experts, if the expert feels differently, then the expert is right. But that's not necessarily the case, both because people have their own incentives, and people, even if they're not trying to pull the wool over your eyes, people just come to different conclusions or get biased unconsciously in different ways because of what they are trying to achieve with the transaction. So absolutely do your own research, use other people's as a starting point only. Next up, number 4, how will you finance it? Big question. So if you're going to be using a mortgage, one of the questions you'll be asking is how long to fix for, if at all. And that's going to be a case of balancing the best rate against certainty. So if you're looking at a 5-year or a 10-year fix, then it's going to cost you more now because the lender has got to price in what they think might happen in the future. But the flip side of not getting the very best rate is that you've at least got certainty. So if you fix for 5 years, then there's a lot to be said for knowing exactly what one of your biggest expenses is going to be. Another thing to think about, though, when you are looking at mortgage products is when you might want to sell or refinance. So, for example, a 5-year fix might have a really good rate. It might seem like a really good idea. But what if in 2 years' time, you think you might be able to refinance to access some of the equity that you gave yourself at the start for getting such a great deal? If you're going to have an early redemption penalty of some kind for doing that, then maybe you'll be wanting to fix for a shorter period of time. Loads and loads to think about with mortgages, but those are some of the issues. For shorter term projects like flips or developments, will you be using cash or bridging? What's the opportunity cost of tying up your cash versus the cost of accessing short-term finance? And then if you are using short-term finance, there's a massive array of different products out there with all kinds of different variables that can be played with. Again, just like for mortgages, having a good broker will be invaluable to help you figure out what's the most important for you and get you the product that makes the most sense. But how to finance it is something to think about early in the process. You would be absolutely astonished by the number of people who go out, find the property, negotiate, go get up the legals underway, are basically committed to buying it, and then think, oh yeah, how am I going to pay for this? It just seems bonkers, but it happens all the time. And the result of that is that they'll end up paying more for their finance because they'll have fewer options than they would have done if they'd started earlier. Well worth thinking about it early on in the process. Next
on the list, what's wrong with it? So, does this deal look a little bit too good to be true? If so, does it mean that that's the case, but you should investigate maybe even deeper than you were going to? Have a look at things like legal issues, lease lengths, mortgageability issues. There's plenty to dig into, the location, future plans for that particular location. Look into it all, because if this is really, really strong and it's been on the market for even a small length of time, then the chances are there's something wrong with it, because if it is a fantastic deal, it's probably going to be snapped up straight away. Now, you might be lucky and you might be the first person to have access to this deal. Then great. That's fine. But just have that as a slight alarm bell. We're always saying push for a good deal, but just make sure that you've covered all the bases and that the deal is as good as you think it is. But remember, no investment is perfect. So if you do find a small downside to a deal, don't write it off. You're looking for very good. Good or very good. That's what you're looking for. Perfect doesn't exist. If you want to find a reason not to invest, you'll find it. So there's got to be that balance.
Number 6, what's the worst that could happen? Another question to ask yourself. And I mean that in a positive way. By thinking about the worst thing that could happen, you're more likely to actually go ahead with it and take action if you've imagined the worst case scenario and you can live with it. What you really want is for there to be more upside than downside. Someone emailed me the other day for an opinion about a deal, and it just seemed to me that there were all kinds of complications and sort of risks in there and not a great deal of upside. And the balance just seemed off to me, and it wasn't something that I personally would have done. But what you really want to be doing is just kind of looking at all the possible downsides and thinking, okay, well, if this risk happens and this comes true and that happens, what's the worst? Can I live with that? Is it still worth it? Would I be able to deal with it? Yes, great. Let's go for it. And if you're able to look at that, have that conversation with yourself, then you're far more likely to push on. And it's extremely rare that all the worst things do all happen that you were anticipating, and therefore it will end up being a good investment.
And finally, number 7, what's plan B? No, not the UK hip-hop artist. Actually, what's a plan B if your deal doesn't go as planned? So, for example, if you're doing a flip, what happens if you can't sell it? Can you let it out? And if so, if you can let it out, will it be enough to make it a worthwhile deal? So look at it. Is the return on investment going to be good enough for you as a buy-to-let? You might not want to think about the plan B because that's not very attractive to you, but you should, because that's a fairly risky strategy. Also, if you're going for a buy-to-let and you just can't get the property let, well then think about your research moving forward and what you could do to address that. But can you then sell it on? Is there enough of a market to flip it? And if the chances are no, you can't flip it, then there's probably a risk with getting it let as well because it's a low demand area. So just think about the plan B. Research, of course, avoids the plan B altogether if you've done good research, because that will massively reduce your risk. But there's no reason at all not to consider a plan B, a what-if scenario, even if it is very remote. Having it in your locker and being comfortable with it will make you far more confident as an investor.
So there you go. 7 questions there to ask yourself before buying your next property, whether your next is your first or you've already done loads every time. I think it's really useful to go through those. If you do, then I think you'll make better decisions and you'll be able to move on with more confidence. You'll find a recap of those along with some of the resources that we talked about in the process at the show notes, which are at thepropertyhub.net/askyourself. You'll also find at those show notes a link to the resource of the week. But before we tell you what that is, Rob, it is time as ever for an iTunes review.
Oh, yes, it is. And applause, please, to Zayed, who left this review. And it's a long one, so bear with me. But it says, I had the pleasure of being introduced to the property podcast via a referral from Francis Dolly, who recommended I purchase the enjoyable 100 property investment tips, which I did and I have not looked back. In every podcast, there is at least one golden nugget of information to be found. These podcasts are a must if you're serious about investing in property or are already investing, as you can never know enough. Rob and Rob deliver great content in an easily digestible and also enjoyable manner. Now, with their added Tuesday podcast, Ask Rob and Rob, about anything property related, it complements the great work these two have been doing over the last few years to help other property investors on their journey. Big thumbs up. And you couldn't see that because I'm doing thumbs up and this is a podcast and I'm in my office on my own, but I'm doing a thumbs up with you, Sayed. So thank you so much for your review, and a thumbs up to you if you've left us one, and or if you're about to very soon because you like the podcast.
Little embedded suggestion in there. I like it. Okay, yeah, thank you for the review. Great stuff. And to pay you back a little bit, we're going to give you, as ever, a resource of the week. And we've got a really good one this week. This is one that I've been using for a couple of weeks now. I'm very impressed. It's got a terrible name, though, so stick with us. It's called Toshal. That is TOSHL. And what it is a personal finance tracking app. Now, because I am no fun whatsoever, I track all the money that I spend. And I always used to use something called the Birdie, but that isn't being actively developed anymore. So I was looking for an alternative and found Toshal. What's really great about it is it's just dead simple. You get a lot of these things which are really complicated, but with this, It makes it dead easy to enter all your spending in there. You can do it from the app. You can do it online. You can do whatever you like. You can categorize your spending so you can see where it's going. And if you're into that kind of thing, I don't use it for this, but it can help you set budgets and all that kind of thing. It's just really, really simple. So I'm not suggesting that tracking every penny is necessarily a healthy thing to do. I'm not necessarily saying it's for everyone, but if you are looking to do so, either just to see where your money's going, or because you want to budget and increase the pace at which you can save up for your next investment, well, worth a look. And it's that whole thing, Rob, where it's what you measure tends to get improved. Unless you know what's going on, if you've got your head in the sand, you're not going to be able to make any progress at all. So a very handy, painless way of doing just that.
So we've kind of given it away on what we are going to talk about next week. We're doing the Property Investor Show live. So if our editor can manage to get together the mangled live recording that we're about to put out in the Property Investor Show over the next couple of days, then you will hear that next week. If not, you might hear Rob and I just sobbing into a microphone, apologising for embarrassing ourselves. Hopefully, though, it's an entertaining episode. So very, very interested to see how that comes out. If you were there, then thank you. Again, it's this time warp where if you listen to this, it's already happened. But you will listen to the results and what happened at the Property Investor Show next week. So very exciting.
Yep, very much so. And in order for that to happen, I need to run because I'd better go and get a plane. But thank you for listening. Go check out the show notes at thepropertyhub.net/askyourself. We'll see you at the Investor Show. We'll be back on Tuesday with Ask Rob and Rob. One way or another, we'll see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to The Property Podcast. For show notes, all our past episodes, and to leave a review, go to thepropertyhub.net/podcast.